Fay, I think most people associate Fay Wray with King Kong.
Most people do. That's true, yes.
Do you like that association? Does that bother you? Or do you
No,
enjoy that?
it doesn't bother me. As the years go by, it pleases me because King Kong is a very enduring film, well-liked film, and so it's a rather pleasure for me to be part of that.
Do you like the film yourself?
Yes, I do like it. I think it's a wonderful piece of motion picture making. I've seen it not very often. I've seen it maybe 5 times, but the last time I saw it, I just recognized it as being an exceptionally fascinating work, really. And at the end, when King Kong is on top of the Empire State Building and is being shot down, even though I had been running from him all during the film, when I saw it, I just felt heartbroken that he was going to be destroyed. It was very touching, it really was. And if you care about someone in a film, it wins you. So I think that's one of the reasons that people have been won to it. They cared about him. They cared about me too, a little bit.
We always knew you were going to make it, though.
Yes, I believe they thought I could get through somehow. That's true.
Did you enjoy the experience of making the film itself?
Yes, I did. I did. I think as much as anything because I really liked the producer director very much. I had worked with him before, and admired his intelligence and his imagination. What an imaginative man he was to get that concept, and he was very stimulating. He was so enthusiastic, and he's just swept you along with his own exuberance. So I just had a good time.
Was it ever difficult dealing with a mechanical monkey's hand?
Well, of course it was. Yes, it was. I was in that hand for long stretches of time, and I would stand on the floor of this studio stage, and they would cinch those fingers around me quite tightly, and there was wire inside the fingers that made it possible to do that. And then, like a teeter-totter leverage, crew would get on the other end from where I was and push down so that I went up in the air, and up there I just had, pardon me, it makes me choke to remember it, doesn't it? I had to try to stay in the hand as much as trying to give the impression that I wanted to get away. Because every little move I made made me slip a little bit through the fingers. And I would have to call to them to please let me down so they could cinch me up again.
Were you high off the ground?
Hang on.
Ready?
Okay.
Let's go back again and start over with the hand.
Yes.
People for many, many years now know Fay Wray as being in the hand of King Kong.
Yes,
What was it like being in that massive mechanical hand?
Well, it was tedious, difficult, tiresome, and in a way exciting too, because I had to imagine the rest of the animal, didn't I? So I was in his fingers and his grip, and I had to look up and imagine what that was like. It was about 30 or 40 feet in my thinking. But the way it operated was that I would stand on the stage and on the floor, and they would cinch these fingers around my waist very tightly, and then they would men would get on the other end of this big hand that had a steel bar in it, and they would press down like a teeter-totter situation, and I would rise up in the air, and it felt like about 10 feet. I don't know how high it was, but maybe 8. That would be a lot. And then I had to be scared and try to get away from him, at the same time sort of hanging on for dear life in case I would slip through. So what a combination of efforts I was making. But I suppose it did look as though I wanted to get away. Where would I have gone, though, if I'd gotten away? I sometimes think about that. I would have gone plop. But it was very interesting to do and to simulate all that excitement without anything except imagination going.
Were you surprised with how realistic it ended up looking on film?
Yes, yes, I was. The King Kong figure, the whole total figure, was about 18 inches high, and they had scenes with him in his habitat, and they had a little doll about 3 inches long, carved out of wood, that he could carry around.
Which was you.
And, well, it was supposed to be
Right.
me. It was supposed to be me. And once I went in to look at what we call the rushes to see the daily work, and I thought, well, that's that doll. That's quite nice, that little doll there. And then that doll began to move and kick, and I knew that was me. So I was just absolutely, it was a mystery to me how they could blend the big hand in me with the little figure and have it all seem like one. Oh, I do respect them for all that they did with that.
Amazing. And that was one of the first big special effects films, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was.
Yeah,
but the
amazing.
man who made those figures was really an artist. He understood anatomy and how to make them move so that they were totally believable.
Yeah. Now, I remember reading that there were some scenes that were done with you in the hand that they had to cut out of the film, that King Kong got a little carried away.
Well, no, not really. Now, those were removed, I suppose, at a time when censorship was really extreme. And all it amounted to was that a couple of sections of my dress, which I cut them myself, to make so that they could put wires onto his fingers and onto these strips, and they could be pulled off like they were flower petals. And I think there were only about 3 or 4, and yet it just seemed as though he was going to continue and like it was too much, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, but it seemed that way.
Yeah. In these days, they'd probably ask for more, right?
Oh, yes, they would. They would indeed, much more.
What was the most exciting thing to you about doing the film King Kong?
I think seeing it finished. Yeah, that was exciting. It was. At first, the first time I saw it, I thought there was too much screaming. I didn't get the idea that in order to make that little doll alive, that a scream would have to be put into that mouth of that little thing. So that's why there was more than I thought was necessary. Yeah. But I realized soon that, but it had a kind of majesty, I thought that film did, the way it concluded, and you came away with an image that was unforgettable at the end with him on top of the Empire State Building.
Do you like being the most remembered as King Kong's girlfriend?
It's all right. I can't change it, can I? So what should I do except accept it graciously and happily? And it has made a lot of people happy around the world, My youngest daughter was in Nepal just recently, and 2 little boys who were assigned as guides, they were 10 or 11, and they suddenly said to her, "Do you know about King Kong?" And it was rather amazing to her that they should ask her that question. And then they told her why they liked it. But it's true that it's gone to every country, I think, every country, and has been appreciated.
What did you think about the remake that Jessica Lange starred a few years ago? Oh.
I didn't see it, no.
Not too many people did.
Pardon?
Not too many people did see it. It wasn't.
Oh, really?
Couldn't match up.
Well, she's. I've not seen her work, but I know she's supposed to be a wonderful actress, and that's, you know. But I just didn't. I didn't feel like seeing it. I think that was it.
Yeah, sure. You have a very interesting history, not just with King Kong, but your book talks about some very interesting relationships that you had and are not afraid to talk about. You were very young when you came to Hollywood.
Yes.
And a little bit later in your life, you met your first husband, who apparently there was a lot of scandal around.
No, well, tragedy. Scandal and tragedy are 2 different things in my judgment. I mean, he had a very tragic ending. Oh, he was brilliant, he was handsome, He was too handsome, and women just sought him out. And he was a Rhodes Scholar, and you have to be very bright to be a Rhodes Scholar. And he was a gifted writer. He wrote some wonderful films. But well, in the first place, I think, Eve, it was Prohibition time, and whatever he drank or anyone drank was lethal. They didn't get anything decent to drink in the first place. And that just destroyed so much in him, and he couldn't stop once he started. So, and things just got worse and worse for him.
So how did that end?
Oh, he committed suicide.
Was that very difficult for you?
Oh, well, of course, of course. We were separated already, though.
There was something interesting that happened that led to your separation. What was that?
Well, he took our child, our little girl, who was 2 years old, and he just kidnapped her and went away. And it's really not so easy for me to go over that. You know, I think it's probably interesting to read about, but it's hard to talk about how anyone could come to that point where he would want to just destroy everything in his past, but just take that little girl because he knew that she meant so much to me.
But you did
he sold our house. He just tried to erase everything of Hollywood. I think that was what was back of it. I think he wanted to get even with Hollywood. He imagined, perhaps, and I'm putting thoughts in his head that I don't know that he had, because I never did get to know him really well, even though we were married for 10 years. But I think that he wanted to blame Hollywood for what happened to him, and therefore he wanted to destroy everything that we had in Hollywood. And it's a fascinating imbalance to think about, that he should have had all the strength, he had the background and the talent and everything to withstand anything that should come along that represented what people call Hollywood destructive. And here I was younger, and I never felt that it did anything like that to me. So it was two different people.
Now, after that marriage, you had a brief interlude, as you mentioned earlier, with a very well-known man, Howard Hughes.
Well, a romantic evening, Eve. Really, but I had known him casually for rather a time. As a matter of fact, he was related by marriage to my husband. My husband's first wife was related to him. But actually, he had just returned from going around the world in his plane. And he was given a ticker tape parade in New York. And that particular weekend, I was staying with mutual friends on Long Island, very wonderful people, a man named Herbert Swope and his wife. And also doing summer theater. And that one afternoon when there was cocktails before dinner, Howard arrived. It was the next day, I think, after the ticker tape parade. And when he came in, he looked, not very elegant. He had on a serge suit and a kind of a not very neat shirt, and he had his belt didn't have a buckle, it was just tied. And the women looked at him, you know, not with any admiration at all. How could he appear this way? And he recognized that. And he took me aside and he said, "Do you know these people very well?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "They'll kill you." What he was saying was that he felt that they would kill him with their sharp remarks, you know. And that was rather sad that he should feel that way, I think. Anyway, he sent me hundreds, it seems to me, of gardenias, and he wanted me to come for the next weekend or so to a friend's house. And I said no, I couldn't do that. but then he put in with the flowers. I said I would have misgivings about that. And he put in with the flowers a nice card that said, "No more misgivings." So anyway, he asked me to meet him down at the East River, 34th Street. And I did. I was separated from my husband, and I found him interesting. He had a quality that was appealing, there's no doubt about that. And when I got down there, he was in a plane, and just a little seaplane. And he was so tall, it seemed like his knees were right under his chin in that little plane. And I sat beside him, and we went up the East River, not high over the water, so we must have had to go under the 59th Street Bridge, I think. We must have had to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went, and there were, he told me there'd be a chaperone, and there was a chaperone, and there was an evening, and so we had a romantic evening, Eve. And that's my story about Howard Hughes. Do you want to know more about him?
I want to know what your overall impression was of the man.
I felt that he was a very gentle person, a rather lonely kind of human being. He was sensitive, very sensitive, almost beginning to be, I wouldn't say paranoid at that time, but too sensitive perhaps. He seemed to me like someone who'd been hurt and was defensive and was looking for, I guess, someone who wouldn't hurt him. Maybe he went on looking and looking and looking, probably did. But he was not a powerful personality, just kind of a sweet, easy, gentle human being. He didn't hear very well. And that made you feel concerned for him, you know. What they did was send him away, I think.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think that you should see
no, they thought that this was a wrong, that he was wrong to be pursuing me. So they sent him away.
Huh, interesting. Were you disappointed, or did you
No,
know?
a little bit, yes, yes. But not seriously, not seriously.
Yeah. You weren't madly in love with him?
No. Well, you can't be. I don't think you can be madly in love with anybody all of a sudden.
No, I don't think so. And you only had one evening with him, really, or two?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Huh.
No.
Do you think had he stayed?
What?
Do you think had he stayed, it would have turned into more for you?
Probably not. Probably not. I think it wasn't in his, wasn't his style,
Yeah.
perhaps, you know.
Yeah. Fly by night, was he?
Hmm?
Was he sort of fly by night?
He had that reputation, and that's why these nice men, who were friends of mine too, they wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah. Are we ready? Okay, great. I think, let's see, we can go on to, oh, I know, I wanted to ask you one more question about Howard Hughes. Are we ready?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In your opinion, what could it have been that led to his going into seclusion?
I think the fear of what people would be saying and thinking of him. I had a little indication of that when I met him at that party, and that must have just increased. I think it must be terrible to have so much money that whoever approaches you would seem to be coming toward you for that. And I think that would be bitter, a bitter feeling. Who could you trust?
Yeah.
And maybe that, see, I'm putting thoughts in his head that he didn't have, but he must have had some unhappy ones, or he wouldn't have gone into hiding like he did.
Did you ever have any contact with him?
Again, no. Mm-mm.
Did you ever regret that you didn't?
No. I really remember him as a gentle, sweet human being, and but I also knew by reputation that he knew lots of ladies, and he probably went on to know more and more. Yes. True.
So it was okay that you weren't just one on that list.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not in favor of that lifestyle at all.
Great. Well, then you went on and had a second marriage.
Yes.
And his name was?
Robert Riskin, a man of great quality, a real humanitarian kind of outlook. Noble. He was a noble human being, I thought, and so talented, so witty, so amusing. He wrote some of the best films, I think, that were made in the 30s. It Happened One Night, you may remember. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Lost Horizon, several others that were all really enchanting. It Happened One Night was the first film that came out of a small studio called Columbia to win all the Academy Award of that year. And it just raised Columbia to the status of a large studio.
Now, you had a terribly difficult time with 5 years of his illness prior to his death.
Yes, oh yes, yes. Tragic. He had a stroke. He became half paralyzed, and he never regained his ability to function. And he was such a good person. He was a wonderful father to my first child. And I had 2 children with him, and they are marvelous.
And now you're in your 3rd marriage.
Yes.
And you're happy?
Oh, yes, it's a wonderful marriage. He's a doctor, he's a surgeon, a neurosurgeon. And I love the idea that he's helping people, and he is. And I feel great about that, too, you know. It's nice feeling. And he's a very enthusiastic person. He's very good to my children. He loves them. I love his children. He had a marriage before. So there's a lot of good feeling. A lot of good feeling.
Now, people would be very shocked to hear how old you are, because you don't look your age. You don't act, quote unquote, your age. How old are you?
Well, I was born in 1907, but I'm not quite that age yet, because my birthday is in September. So we'll just take a pause for people to add up.
1907.
Yes. Right.
And it's
See?
1989.
So I will be. Isn't that exciting? I think it's wonderful. I think it's I'm glad I'm a creative human being, that I'm productive, that I'm interested, that numbers of that kind seem not to matter to me. Yeah. When I look at myself on the screen presently, I expect to see someone very young, because that's how I feel. I'm a little startled like that. But I don't mind. I don't mind. No, I really feel good.
You strike me as being very energetic and very young for what you would think an 81-year-old woman would be. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. What is it, if you can just sum it up in a paragraph, what is it that accounts, do you think, for your incredible youth?
Well, I think it's just an attitude of loving life, loving people, caring about people, finding interest and beauty, particularly in almost everything that I see. Or there's so much. There's music. There's literature. There's so much joy around if you can just take it, you know. So.
That's great. Do you have any advice for other people who want to maintain a youthful outlook on life?
Not one drop of advice, because but what I mean by that is that no one can sort of tell anyone else what to do. If someone should see me and say, well, she looks good, or she looks young, and I get some vitality from her, or a vibration, that's all the advice that I could give, is to just let a vibration come through.
That's wonderful. When you look back over your entire career, how many films have you made? 70, 80?
Oh yes, I think so. Again, I don't count a lot.
A lot. You've made a lot.
I've made a lot of them. A lot of them, yes.
Which film do you remember as being the most pleasurable experience making of?
I think, in spite of King Kong, which I think was a wonderful film, the first big feature film that I made, The Wedding March with Erich von Stroheim, was an absolutely wonderful experience for me because it was my first big film. It was the most interesting role. I never got another that could even touch it. And so that's very much in my heart.
That's wonderful. One last question before we go that I forgot to ask you when we were talking about King Kong. How did you land the role of King Kong's girlfriend?
Well, I didn't land it. I was asked to do it. So I made, it just happened that I had known that nice man, Marion Cooper, had done a film with him before, and he liked me, and he visualized me being in it, and he asked me to come and talk about it. And he said, "You're going to have the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood." And so it just happened that way.
Is King Kong the favorite leading man you've ever had?
Oh, of course not. The real ones are more exciting.
Who's your favorite leading man?
Well, I think my favorite would be a man I never made a movie with, but a play. I was in a play with him just before I did King Kong. And I was really hoping that Marion Cooper meant him, and that's Cary Grant. Now that would suit him with the tall, dark leading man. And when I heard that, I was just hoping very much that it might be Cary, because I knew he was coming from New York, where we had just been working together, and maybe my friend Marion Cooper knew about him. So I was disappointed to have it be what it was, and not Cary, but he was wonderful to work with, and I had a lovely friendship with him always.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Well,
Pleasure chatting with you.
oh, my dear, I enjoy talking with you.